Steam wasn't always like this. Today it feels endless. Thousands of games, new releases every day. But if you scroll long enough, you start to notice something. Most of them aren't made by big studios. They're smaller, stranger, more personal. And somehow they took over the platform. So, what actually changed? How did indie games go from niche experiments to defining what Steam is today? When Steam launched in 2003, it wasn't a store. It was a delivery system for Valve's own games. And when it became a storefront around 2005-2007, it stayed controlled. To release a game on Steam, you needed direct approval from Valve. There was no submission portal, no open access. This wasn't a marketplace, it was a curated shelf. Valve acted as a gatekeeper. They selected which games appeared, when they launched, how they were featured, which meant visibility wasn't earned, it was granted. For players, this meant consistency. For developers, especially indie ones, it meant invisibility. So, how do you break into a system that isn't open? You don't, you wait for it to change. In 2012, Valve introduced something new, Steam Greenlight. Instead of Valve deciding alone, developers could submit their games and players would vote. If a game received enough support, it would be approved for release. This shifted the gatekeeping process from internal curation to community validation, but the system wasn't automated. Votes didn't guarantee entry. Valve still made the final call. For the first time, indie developers had a path, not a guarantee, but a chance. Games like Rust in 2013 and The Forest in 2014 used Greenlight to build early audiences before even launching. But if players decide what gets in, what happens when too many games try? The door opened and everything started pushing through. In 2017, Valve removed Greenlight entirely and replaced it with Steam Direct. Now, any developer could release a game on Steam. All it required was a submission process, a $100 fee per game. No voting, no approval queue, just entry. This turned Steam into an open platform. There was no longer a bottleneck, no central filter. The only barrier left was publishing. Before Steam Direct, 2,000 games released annually. After Steam Direct, in 2017, around 7,000 games, and in 2018, 9,000 games. Growth continued year over year. This wasn't a gradual shift, it was an explosion. But if everyone can enter, how do players find anything? The platform didn't shrink, it adapted. When curation disappeared, it had to be replaced, not by people, but by systems. Steam introduced discovering queue, recommendation algorithms, tag-based filtering. Instead of a front page deciding everything, Steam began personalizing the store. Each player saw different games, different recommendations, different trends, based on playtime, wishlist activity, and purchase history. This changed discovery completely. Games didn't need global visibility anymore, they needed the right audience. And this is where indie games found their advantage. They didn't need everyone, they just needed someone. Indie games weren't just more common, they were different. Without publisher constraints, developers could build niche ideas, target specific audiences, iterate faster. On Steam, this mattered, because the algorithm rewarded engagement, reviews, retention, not marketing budgets. Stardew Valley, built by one developer, sold millions within months. Hades used early access feedback loops. Undertale gained traction through community sharing. These games didn't need mass appeal, they needed resonance. But if indie games succeed, what happens when thousands try to do the same? Success becomes harder to see. By the late 2010s, Steam had a new problem. Too many games. Thousands of releases each year meant most games received little visibility. Many sold under 1,000 copies. Discovery became unpredictable. The algorithm favored early traction, strong reviews, player attention. If a game didn't perform quickly, it disappeared. The open system created opportunity, but it also created noise. So how do you stand out in a system with infinite supply? Steam needed a new filter. By the early 2020s, understanding Steam wasn't optional anymore. It became part of making the game itself. The platform hadn't just changed how games were discovered, it changed how they had to be launched. Developers weren't just building games anymore, they were building for the system. And that system relied on signals, discovery queue, personalized recommendations, tag-based browsing, wishlist tracking. These systems weren't just features, they became survival tools. By the early 2020s, success on Steam depended on wishlist counts before launch, early traction within the first 24 to 48 hours, conversion rates from impressions to sales. Launch day became critical. If a game performed well immediately, Steam's algorithm would amplify it. If it didn't, it disappeared. Early access also became a strategy, not just for development, but for visibility and community building over time. Games could launch early, gather feedback, build momentum, and reappear in the algorithm multiple times. For developers, this changed everything. Making a good game wasn't enough. You had to understand the system, timing, marketing, momentum. They became part of development itself. But even these systems couldn't keep up with what Steam was becoming, because the scale kept growing. By the mid-2020s, Steam reached a scale it had never seen before. Over 15,000, then 18,000, and eventually more than 20,000 games releasing every year. This wasn't growth anymore, it was volume. By this point, the system wasn't just influencing success, it was shaping the entire platform. Instead of equal visibility, Steam became distribution by momentum. A small number of games captured the majority of attention, while thousands of others received almost none. Visibility was no longer stable, it became temporary. Games appeared on discovery feeds, in recommendation slots, on trending lists, but only for a short time. Hours, days, sometimes less. Then they were replaced by whatever gained traction next. At the same time, development itself accelerated. Game engines became more accessible. Production pipelines became faster. By the mid-2020s, more solo developers were releasing games than ever before. Small teams could produce full commercial titles. Asset libraries and middleware reduced development time. And increasingly, AI-assisted tools began entering workflows, not replacing developers, but accelerating output. The barrier to entry had never been lower, but the barrier to attention had never been higher. And yet, at the top of the platform, indie games were thriving. Breakout success still happened. Small teams still reached massive audiences. Games like Vampire Survivors, Lethal Company, Balatro reached millions of players without traditional publishers. The system didn't remove success, it concentrated it. A small percentage of games generated most of the visibility, most of the sales, most of the attention, but those games defined the platform. They shaped what genres felt relevant, what mechanics spread, what players expected next. So, Steam didn't become an indie platform by design, it became one to outcome. Because in a system with unlimited supply, the games that succeed aren't the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones that capture attention quickly, connect with a specific audience, and sustain momentum long enough to matter. So, what does that leave us with? A platform where anyone can release a game, but only a few are seen. Scroll through Steam today and you'll see thousands of games. Some will never be played, some will disappear unnoticed, and a few will define entire genres. Steam didn't just open the doors to indie games, it removed the doors entirely. But in doing so, it created a system where success isn't guaranteed, only possible. In the beginning, access was the barrier. Today, visibility is. And in that space between the two, indie games didn't just survive, they became what Steam is. New case files release every Monday, Wednesday and Friday.